Hello, everyone. Steve Ankerstar. Thank you so much for tuning in. Welcome to the Basics of Estate Planning, which is one of our initial courses from our classroom financial presentations that now that we're in our building, we are going to run at least twice a month from now on to bring in folks. So thanks for coming out today. Also for folks that tune in online through the live stream, thanks for checking us out. But really, it's just to start getting some more basic information out into your hands on specific topics that you may find useful. Now, today is part one of a two-part of estate planning. So hopefully tonight's kind of basic. Hopefully it's just reinforcing things you already know. If not, maybe you pick up something along the way that is new to you that you haven't thought of before. And if anything makes a difference, then it's certainly all worthwhile. But before we get started, let's take a look at the disclaimers. It's a financial education presentation, so you have to do your own due diligence for acting upon anything you hear in this presentation. More disclaimer information is available at ankerstarwealth.com, and the opinions expressed are mine and mine alone. This is also a tax topic. This is also a legal topic. So with tax and legal topics, remember our licenses here in the financial planning world stop prior to actually being to execute your will or your trust. So even though I'm talking to you about a legal topic, my license stops short of executing it. So where often the wealth manager fits in is we sit down with you and we draft your game plan and kind of get inside your head as to what you're thinking, how you want to set things up for your estate. And then we approach our estate lawyer. I'm happy to announce we have a new estate lawyer that we're working with here local to the Texas area. So certainly reach out to your advisor or out to us direct if you're not already a client, if you want to know more information. Again, you don't have to involve us. You can go direct, but often we help you flush out a lot of your thoughts before actually talking to the lawyer. And as you know, they can be very expensive. So what is estate planning? When you think of estate planning, think of yourself now as an entity. So when it's just you and you're growing up and you graduate high school and or college, you enter the workforce, things are pretty straightforward. It's just you. If something happens to you, probably your stuff and things and life's accomplishments are going up to your parents if they're still around. If not, maybe off to a sibling, that sort of thing. Things get a little more complicated when you get married, and then certainly when you have kids and the family tree starts to blossom out. So really the estate planning piece of it is thinking that the best analogy that I like to use with clients is the empty chair scenario. It's like just kind of think around when you have everybody around at the house. If there was an empty chair, how would we be impacted? Empty chair meaning you lost somebody. These things do happen. It's kind of one of those that'll never happen to me until it does. And then it's one of those you just want to make sure that you've been prepared for it, at least to a certain extent. Again, you don't have to over prepare. You don't have to obsess over it. But at least to a certain extent, you've thought through, okay, what would happen if dad wasn't here or mom wasn't here or sister wasn't here or brother wasn't here, that sort of thing. So that is the purpose of all of it. You can read through the specific documents, which we'll kind of go into detail on. But really, it's just kind of the general plan. If something happened to somebody that's in our circle, what would we do? Do they have the documents that they should have? And if they have the documents, where are they? Are they in a desk drawer somewhere? So those are kind of the basics things of, so you may think, well, I already have all this stuff. Does everybody in your inner circle that's around that table, do they know where those documents are? Or on the unfortunate car accident scenario where everybody sitting around the table is all of a sudden affected by a car accident, does somebody's sister, brother, parents, friend, does somebody know where the documents are, so to be able to come in and to take care of the situation after a massive change like that? So who needs it? If you own assets, you need it. So when you think, okay, I graduated from high school or college, maybe I just have like my stuff in my room, probably not. But certainly once you start acquiring cars and then up into houses, businesses, bank accounts, brokerage accounts, if you're a good lifelong investor, like we like to encourage, you'll have a UTMA or a 529 accounts that are going to be in your name as a young adult. So those are assets you want to think about. Where are those going if something happens to you? And again, nothing's going to happen to you, but this is why we plan for it, because things do unfortunately happen to people. The middle line there is probably the best on thinking. Is a lot of folks are like, well, I don't want to pay for will. It's pretty straightforward. And I understand that, right? I'm a frugal person by nature. And it's if somebody depends on you, that's when it really kind of makes a difference, right? So about the time you get married, well, guess what? Somebody's depending on you, regardless of what you bring to the fight into the marriage, right? But somebody depends on you at that point. So that's the that's the time to start thinking about that stuff, even just the basics, right? But if you want to start thinking of if you want to control somebody's decisions in the future, my lights faded. Stand by just 1 second. There they are. There we go. Sorry about that. It's crazy. They're on a timer here, so therefore, if I need to make sure somebody waves their arms to make sure to keep the lights on. So if you want to control personal decisions in the future, so if something happens to you and there's nothing in place, things will follow Texas state law if you're in Texas or wherever states you happen to be in. So that's the sort of if you want to have control over exactly what happens, who gets your comic book collection, who gets your La La Loopsy dolls, those sorts of things, then you want to put something down to paper. Okay, why is it important? Control, minimize cost. Control is number one, right? You want to make sure your assets go to where you want it to go. But that minimized cost, it can get a little bit expensive if you just go into probate. Now you have to involve a court, and court has to come in and help adjudicate where things are going if there's really nothing in place. So you want to avoid that. Disputes, if you have maybe a contentious situation where some children may think that they're getting something, and obviously if there's only one of that thing, one of the children is getting it, the other is not. You want to be very clear in English on paper who is getting those sort of things. And then care for loved ones. Certainly when it comes to minor children, there's the people who we want to take care of our children if something happens to us, and there's maybe people in our lives who think they should be the one that should be taking care of the children for us, and maybe we don't agree with that. So you want to be very specific on who is caring for minor children. Healthcare wish is another one. As you know, my parents are both, one's 90, the other's approaching 90. So we've just recently kind of redone all of the, nearing end of life, sort of, it's not imminent, but, sort of those things you think about, down the road, if you will, as far as there's a do not resuscitate election that you can make, kind of exactly what the healthcare folks, because, the healthcare folks are charged with keeping you alive. So if your intent is, I don't need to be kept alive for, $3 million, then you need to put that into your legal documents to kind of communicate that, what are you expecting here? Otherwise, they will do everything in their power. And the last thing is privacy. Some of this stuff can go public in the probate process, and you may or may not want that. Excuse me. Okay. By far the easiest and what we deal with the most of the time is beneficiaries. So when you have an account with us, if you're with Schwab, or if you don't, if you have other accounts, if it's an IRA account, you will have a beneficiary on it. It's mandatory. And at least in Texas, it's mandatory that it's your spouse, unless you get special permission for it to be somebody other than your spouse, which means your spouse has to give you that permission. So most cases, just think of a married with kids type of family. The spouse would be the primary beneficiary, and then the kids would be the contingent beneficiaries. If you have a bank account, or if you have a taxable brokerage account, those are not set automatically. They're not asked for by part of the paperwork process. A lot of accounts, if you're married, you will have a joint account. So therefore, if something happens to one of you, it simply goes to the other. But there's also no beneficiary that's outlined past that in case of the car accident scenario where you and your spouse are driving along, and then all of a sudden tragedy strikes, and then what happens to that account? So you want to be very specific. So there's primary, which is who gets it first, and then contingency is how it kind of spreads down from there. And then you get into some legal discussions about per stirps, that sort of thing. Often you don't need that level of delineation, if you will. But these do override your will. So when you think, okay, something happens, beneficiaries go first. So this past weekend we did have, unfortunately, we lost a good friend of mine from high school, and it was Friday night. And as soon as we find out, that we let Schwab know, that Schwab account is now restricted. So that limited power of attorney that we use for our legal ability to go in and manage the account has now terminated, because the person is no longer with us. So therefore that LPOA or any other powers of attorney expire upon death. So the account goes restricted. And then we look at the account, see who the beneficiary is, contact the beneficiary, let them know, hey, this is your money that's coming to you. Obviously, the beneficiary in this case is dealing with a lot of emotional stress, having dealt with this kind of out of the blue situation. So it's more of an awareness of when the time is right in the process, we can get you an amount of money that is now due to you. And the rest of that means you open an account with Schwab, and then that money transfers from the deceased into the beneficiary's account. And at that point, the beneficiary can choose to stay with Schwab, move the money out of Schwab, take the money out, do basically anything from in there. So that's how beneficiaries work. So if you don't have that on a joint account and you want, reach out to your advisor, or call, if you're not with us, if you're, call your custodian or whatever and say, hey, I want to put a beneficiary on this account. How do I do it? It's often called a TOD designation, which is transfer on death. Nobody likes to say death, but that's what it is. Transfer on death designation, where you can be very specific. And again, you can do primary and contingent as well. These do override your will, which means the money moves first. Why do we use the term often? Well, if the will says split everything 50-50 between my two children, again, this a lawyer would tell you this specifically, and there's one account out there where only one of the kids was the beneficiary, and that went to that person. So when the will is adjudicated, if you will, you might see an equalization of assets down the road. So that's why you definitely, the money moves to beneficiary first. But when the will is adjudicated, you may take a look at a balancing of assets there. So it certainly overrides it initially, but it may come back in. So, okay. Beyond beneficiaries, which is what you're going to set up for your financial accounts. Again, you can do it brokerage accounts, bank accounts. I don't think you can do it with a car or a house or anything like that. I haven't seen that. Past that, kind of the next level of protection is your key estate planning document, which is the will. Now, the will there's all kinds of wills, and I forget the legal term. There's if you just tell somebody, hey, at bedside, split things up, but Jimmy gets my fast cars thing. There's a certain level that goes up to a verbal will. Watch a movie, you can see these things play out real time a lot. But really, you're looking for a written legal document that's going to outline that out. And a lot of times, where we're going to talk about trusts in a second, but really with wills, a lot of times they are written intentionally vague. So there can be interpretation, which is now trust is really kind of on the other side. They're written very specific because they don't want to be vague. So this is the lawyers may correct me, but certainly when we have our initial conversation, what you'd want to do is, I tell folks, I'm just like, hey, if you have a couple of adult children and everything's going to be kind of split equally, and everybody is a good responsible adult and could handle the amount of money that's coming their way and not mess up their life, and nobody's got special needs or a situation that drives something different for funds, then generally a will is what I at least suggest that we start talking to the lawyer about. And that's in my situation, honestly, with just being personal. There is the kids are grown, everybody's pretty well on board. I think a will is good to go, and that doesn't really make a difference to me personally, how high the asset. It's not like if I get $1 million, I need a will or a trust, or if I need, 5 million, that's when you need a trust. So it's not really, in my mind, based on the amount of assets. It's on the complexity needed for an adjudication of those assets. Hopefully those words make sense. And you see the bottom line there: without a will, state law will decide who inherits your property and cares for your children, and that doesn't happen overnight. So that's why you want to sort of get that into writing there, so you know what's going on from there. Okay, the last one we'll talk about is the planning documents, the trust. It can be very flexible or it can be very specific. So what you want to do is you want to draft this out first, kind of with the specifics of your situation. Now, there's types of trusts. There's revocable living trusts, which are often the ones you do when you're alive, right? So you can change your mind. It's kind of built right into the name of the title there. You also have irrevocable trusts, where you could be taking your trust in setting things up and in moving assets while you're alive. So if you hear some of the more complex stuff, where I'm putting my house in the trust and then I'm giving it to my children and then they're going to rent it back to me. Okay, well, now you're thinking irrevocable type stuff, meaning you're moving the asset into somebody else's name. That's not necessary. You want to think about that if you're going to do that. And then the last one, special needs trust. Certainly, in those situations where you have an adult or where you have a child that grows into an adult and can't care for itself inside of society, then you'll have a trust with assets tied to that to be able that are specifically tied for that child. So these are things that once there's a trust, some of them are created upon death. So you create the trust and it's just sitting there, and then if something happens to the people that drew up the trust, then the trust goes into effect. It becomes an entity, and then there's a trustee that executes that. Sometimes you can create the trust while you're alive. You become your own trustee to go in there and execute what's going on. And if somebody, say it's a couple of spouses and one of the spouses passes away, then you can have the other spouse add a child in as the trustee. So there's kind of always two. So there's a lot of flexibility in a trust. So when you think of setting one up, there's going to be they're not free, just like a will. You're going to pay a certain amount. Trust, you're going to pay a little bit more. I won't quote prices because everybody we use can come in a little bit different, and it would depend on the complexity of your situation. However, expect that if you set up a trust, then if you're not the trustee, you're going to pay a trustee. So think nominal, like $500 a year, somebody to execute the trust. But if you want to make changes to that trust, each time you go back in, you are going to be paying, that 500 to 1,000. That's not an exact quote, but a chunk of change to be go in and actually change the dates or change the circumstances of the trust. So it's good that it gives you some flexibility. It's not good that every time you touch it or change something, you're gonna pay a little bit extra. But it is that advanced level of legal protection that you may consider there. Okay. Here is where we are going to stop talking about specifics and just say there is a lot of stuff that can go into a trust. And this is more of the part 2 of this series, which we're going to do. It's online at ankerstarwealth.com/events. Has the actual date, is when we're going to talk about more of the advanced topics. But when you think generally what can go into a trust, obviously we've talked about brokerage accounts, real estates, bonds, stocks, cash, all of that can be retitled into a trust, and it can happen while you are alive if you have a living trust. So a common mistake in trust land is to create a trust and then not move anything into it. And then you pass away and then you have a trust, but none of the assets were moved in. So if you think you have something that's in your trust and you look at the title of that thing, whether it's a vehicle, a house, a bank account, brokerage account, and it doesn't say trust with a name and a date behind it, it is for sure not in that trust because it will be right there into the title. So kind of a two-step process: set up the trust and then move assets into the trust. And maybe you leave some assets out, maybe you don't. But anyhow, that's when the trust goes into effect, it gets its own ITIN or EIN, if you will. Basically, it's an entity identification number. And from there, the trust stays into effect until all the assets are adjudicated out of the trust. Okay. Couple of things as we fade into the close for other documents you kind of need. Power of attorneys. I'm sure many of you have thought of this. There are some certain stages in life when you want to use power of attorneys. One, I was military, so every time I took a trip overseas, I needed at least a limited power of attorney to someone to be able to make sure my bills got paid, or if something happened at my house, they need to be able to walk over and act on my behalf. And again, in those situations, you want a limited power of attorney, which is very straightforward and very specific as to what they're allowed to do. If you give somebody a general power of attorney, you're basically handing over all of your decisions. So make sure that you have the correct relationship with that person to be able to do that. Obviously, a spouse would fall under that, but a best friend, vet your own best friends on who gets that kind of authority in your life. When we talk down here, you can see some other terminology about financial or attorney. In fact, those are very specific things. So as you go into this, a lot of stuff you can do online at LegalZoom. I don't really recommend that because I've tried it, and you kind of have to put yourself through law school a little bit. So it's depending on what your time is worth, you may consider I think I will just go. Most of the stuff is not all that expensive if you're getting basic stuff. Medical power of attorney, again, that's the healthcare decision. So obviously be very careful who you hand that to. But those are documents that if you check into, like I said, I'm very open. We moved to my parents into assisted living earlier this year. So again, going through the medical power of attorney and kind of having that conversation now to figure out, okay, how do we want to handle these different sorts of scenarios are better than when you're in the midst of the scenario trying to have that conversation. Okay, advanced directives, again, now we're getting into that living will situation on exactly what treatment should be pursued and what shouldn't. And then the DNR we talked about briefly is, again, medical people are under their oath has them keeping you alive unless they're told differently. So a DNR would be kind of critical if you're the type of person, which I think I will be when I'm there. Hopefully not anytime soon, but certainly it's just like, hey, if my time's up, please allow me to have that moment. Don't keep bringing me back, right? And ringing the register. A lot of times it can be a financial decision, but also a quality of life decision. But ultimately ensures the end of life wishes are respected. Okay. Last things we will close with, I think it's my last slide. So remember, get those beneficiaries. If you're working with us, it's okay. You can look online and see if there's a beneficiary on your account. Again, IRAs have them. Taxable accounts do not necessarily. If you can't figure it out, call your advisor, or if you're not with us, call your custodian to figure it out. You really should have somebody on that. How assets are titled, always take a look at that. We just talked about making sure that if you think it's in the trust, it'll say it's in the trust. Digital assets, so I don't want to hijack since we do talk about Bitcoin a lot. If you're investing in digital assets through us, we're going to have you holding it in some manner through your brokerage. So it's not like you're going to, you're going to have, if you have your own crypto wallet, that's on you. We're not helping you with that. If you have gold buried in the backyard and you have your survival, area, we don't know about that. Or if we do, that's not kind of our responsibility. But so if you're with us, you're kind of safe because that stuff's going to travel with the beneficiary you have on that account. If you have a crypto wallet and you're off doing what I would call more advanced stuff than I know how to do, or really anything that's password protected, make sure that somehow information is captured and should be in the same drawer, closet, space, wherever, safe with your will and other things. So somebody can find it. We've heard the stories. The stories are like hilarious, unless it's you, that it's tragic, right? So just make sure that all that stuff is not lost. And as you know, we believe that that's going to be a major player going forward, is we're going to see more and more of this stuff. So we have to think about that a little bit more than we have when we were growing up. And then lastly, you can prepay for funeral and burial wishes. So you can, chop the check. My parents did it without asking me. I do. Be careful. I'm not sure that everybody out there is on the up and up in the best interest of the individuals, right? Because these are businesses out there. And one thing I don't like to use the word hate, but I will throw it out there strongly I hate the advertising that comes out of CNBC every day with, reverse mortgages and sell your life insurance plan back to the company. You're sitting on a gold mine. Just like expletives or what comes to my mind on that sort of stuff. So yes, it is nice to be able to take this burden and prepay and lock in a price. Just if you do, get the folder and know where the folder is. And I've looked at the folder and I've looked through it, to make sure they're not making too cheap of choices on some of these things for proper end of life and respect and that sort of thing. But certainly if you feel strongly about that, there are legitimate companies out there, no doubt, that can be able to take care of that for you. And again, you pay today's prices as their advertising instead of the inflated prices in the future, if you think inflation is going to be a thing. Okay. Closing with don't delay. This is the will is a ultimate back burner item. You get married and it's like, hey, we'll get a will. 10 years later, it's like, oh, never did get that will, right? So these are no fun. Nobody likes to, hey, let's reach out to a lawyer because it's going to cost money. But these are things that that's where advisors we work kind of in that middle ground. It's kind of for free because we want to make sure that you're doing the smart things for you. So it's part of our care and feeding of you is that, hey, if we're bugging you about this, it's going because you do need to get it done, even though we can't do it for you. And then review regularly. Kind of depends. I view it as a life change, right? A marriage is a life change. A divorce is a life change. A child into this world is a life change. A child out of this world is a life change. When you have children and they get married, that is a life change. And there are numerous issues, not numerous, there are many cases out there, I should say, where just think about maybe your family and their family aren't necessarily on. You can accidentally disinherit somebody if you don't have things written kind of correctly. Say you have a daughter and she marries and then the daughter passes away, but your will says split everything equally amongst the kids, and the will goes boom, and then everything goes to your one daughter, and you've literally disinherited your other child's entire family tree. So mature adult people can figure those out even if things aren't written. But then again, you start throwing on big numbers and you'll find that everybody's maturity level is not exactly, may not necessarily be on the up and up. So something to think about. 3 to 5 years isn't bad, but I tend to think of major life changes. All right, here's our team here at Ankerstar Wealth. We're always happy to reach out. We're always happy to talk to you about any of these topics. And again, thanks so much for attending, for those in person as well as those online. They were going to do these again twice a month on a variety of different topics, but hopefully you find these useful. And if you have any comments or questions, make sure you put them right there in the chat, and we'll come back and address them. You have a good one.